the extension in life with these drugs is small. It's probably fair to say that in the scheme of cancer services as a whole, and I'm talking about the whole range of treatments, including surgery, radiotherapy, and then even thinking beyond somebody as a diagnosis of cancer, spending on cancer prevention and early diagnosis, the spend on cancer drugs, or the additional spend on a cancer drugs fund, has to be viewed as a much lower priority than properly organising cancer services.
But for those suffering from cancer, like Alistair, each month is precious.
It's a great misconception when they say, what's the point of a drug that only extends life by 4 weeks? And they think, so you get 4 weeks and you die in agony. And that's just nonsense, because it could be 4 weeks, it could be 4 years. It's variable from people to people. You don't just set your watch and go, oh, I must die on Tuesday at 2 o'clock. It doesn't work like that. You could survive many, many months or many years.
It felt quite cold to be talking about somebody's life as a business case. Something felt very wrong about it, putting a price on somebody's life, really. You know, was it talking about the benefit of, you know, this drug could prolong on average 3 months of somebody's life? Well, I thought, well, 3 months prolonging somebody's life is, when it's your mum, I'll take that.
Difficult financial and ethical decisions are going to have to be taken about what to spend a limited budget on.
We're facing a huge pressure in terms of the projected increase in the number of patients diagnosed with cancer. And so there's a greater pressure on the service because there's more treatment being given to a greater number of patients. And if we don't start addressing that problem now, we're going to have a cancer service in its entirety that isn't fit for purpose in 10 to 15 years' time.
Already, waiting times for patients are causing alarm. It should take no more than 62 days between anyone seeing their GP with possible cancer to their first definitive cancer treatment. The health service has a target of achieving this in 95% of cases. But in July of this year, it was failing to do this. We can reveal that in that month, the target was met in only 71% of cases.
The time from symptoms to diagnosis is very crucial. Essentially, for most cancers, almost all cancers in fact, the earlier you diagnose it, the better the outcome, and the more likely the patient is to survive their cancer. If there's slippage there, we will see slippage in our survival rates, I'm sure about that. So any step back from that is going to be a disaster.
Until recently, John Compton was the Chief Executive of the Health and Social Care Board. Cancer waiting times are progressively slipping. How worried are you about this?
Clearly concerned if there's any movement in cancer waiting times, because they do get a priority and people are very, very anxious about it inside the system, because they know, people who work in the system know the potential implications of all of this.
I don't think we're at the tipping point yet, but having discussed the various issues, particularly the increasing incidence of cancer and of course the current budget crisis, yeah, we may not be too far away from that.
One area where waiting times have got worse in the last year is urgent breast cancer cases. Spotlight has discovered there's recently been a critical deterioration in referral times. All referrals should take place within 14 days. But in July, this was only achieved in 46% of cases. How did that happen? Is it about money?
Well, I'm only in the position 6 days, and that's one of the issues I want to establish why that did happen. It's very serious. But also, I reassured that when it was identified, the Trust acted immediately.
The Department of Health also says it is now carrying out a fundamental review of cancer services. In this financial year, the department says it's £140 million short of what it needs to meet demand. The Stormont executive has ring-fenced health spending from any cuts. So in the last 3 years, it has allocated small increases in funds. But after inflation and other factors, this has actually meant a cut in real terms in the last 2 years.
Every single year, the health system has to look at what it's going to cost to run the same system next year, taking account of the new services that it needs to bring online, the new drugs that are coming in, paying for the inflation that's there in the middle of all of that. So every single year it has to find 6%.
And the numbers are going to get more difficult. This Department of Health briefing document predicts that next year's shortfall will be almost double this year's.
Remember, we've had a 6% growth in demand for services in the health service and a 2% increase in resources. And after 4 years, that is beginning to show, those tensions are beginning to become very evident. We do need extra money. That's an absolute priority.
But where is the money going to come from to provide care for increasing numbers of cancer patients? With rising costs and inevitably less and less money coming from Westminster.
The executive has now got to raise or find a serious sum of money from a stagnant or falling budget. That's the business of government, the ordinary everyday business of government. Governments all over the world have to take these kind of decisions. And if it can't do that, then really it isn't fit for purpose. You need to start looking at really difficult issues like water charging, public sector pay, perhaps putting the regional rate up significantly. Stormont has never done that. And then when you consider that we've got the devolution of corporation tax and income tax, quite likely, well, do we put that up to pay for health, or do we take a gamble and put them down and hope for growth? Suddenly you're confronting major, difficult, quite ideological questions.
The current budget problems are partly as a result of the executive's failure to agree to implement welfare reform here. As a result, the British Treasury is imposing fines on Stormont, £7.5 million a month, and that's money that could be spent elsewhere.
Whatever money might be saved by agreeing welfare reform, currently the cost of £7.5 million a month, 1 month of that would pay for a cancer drugs fund in its entirety for Northern Ireland.
But the Stormont stalemate makes something seemingly straightforward apparently impossible.
It's an enforced mandatory coalition, which under the present structure means that decision making is painfully slow or null and void. It just can't happen. And I think we all agreed that something has to be done to make the executive more fleet of foot and to make decisions, because at the minute, frankly, there's so much lying out there gathering dust. It's an embarrassment.
We won't be part of listening to a cabinet of billionaires requesting that we tax or target those who are already most vulnerable. That is not the way that our society needs to go forward.
But Alistair blames all the politicians at Stormont for foot dragging. He believes there are ways in which money could be found to help people in his situation.
I feel angry with the situation. It's extremely frustrating. I mean, the amount of money involved here is quite small. It's really about how it's delivered. And it's people are arguing about ideology. They're arguing about principles whilst men and women are dying. But, you know, that's the crazy bit. It can be done. It's totally and utterly doable. They just can't agree on the way forward.
But even if the parties were to find money in the budget for a cancer drugs fund, for Alistair and Vera, it may be too late.
I just know time's running out. It's probably running out faster than I'd like it to. But it's not just me, there's lots of people in the same boat. People will die tomorrow or next month, whatever, that will never benefit from the drugs that could help them or at least ease their suffering. And every single second of every day that people procrastinate, that situation perpetuates.
It's very difficult to think that my mum's life is coming down to finances, and for us it's obviously our desire is to prolong life as much as possible and to not have her to make choices that drugs that are available in England should be available to her here in Northern Ireland.
That's very good. There's a lot to it. I would love to have the drug. I would love to have it for myself, for other people. But I have to accept that in my time I might not get it. But if I fight for it now, maybe it will be available someday.
People say, oh, we can't afford this, we can't afford that. I say to them, you walk a mile in my shoes. See if you can afford it. I feel anger at my situation and at the existence of drugs that can help, and sadness that society somehow and our politicians can't come together to make this a real possibility. I've come through crisis before. I've survived much longer than many people in my position. I'm going through a crisis at the minute, and it may come out to my satisfaction, it may not. I have no way of knowing. I just know that the drugs that I need are there, and I really need to have a go at them. They mightn't work, they may not work, but I just want the opportunity to try them.